Moving on to our panel. Thank you so much for coming out today again. We brought together an incredible group of community leaders from different backgrounds and sectors, and what connects their work to ours at Movement is a shared belief that public transit is about freedom. It's about the freedom to move, to access opportunities, to feel a sense of belonging in our city. Rather than approaching these challenges that we saw Dennis unpack in isolation, today is about understanding how transit connects our shared experiences across economic, social, and environmental issues, and how we can build solutions together. I'll introduce our panelist, Annie Ohana. Please is a public school educator and equity department head at LA Matheson Secondary, and president of Share Pride, supporting the queer South Asian community in Metro Vancouver. Thanks, Annie. Adriana Spiker is the Indigenous Relations Manager on the Fraser River Tunnel Project and chair of Surrey's Black, African, and Caribbean Advisory Committee. Her work focuses on community-informed solutions around food security, transportation access, and social equity. All right, thanks. Nicholas Tellez Espana is the manager of the Surrey Local Immigration Partnership at Diversity Community Resources, where he leads collaborative efforts to support newcomers, integration, and equitable access to opportunities, including transit. Thanks, Nick. Sukhpreet Danjal is a trained lawyer from India and a graduate of the Justice Institute of BC in law enforcement. She currently works as a victim support worker at Surrey Women's Centre and brings lived experience as both a newcomer and a transit rider. Thank you all for being here. Let me get a round of applause for amazing panelists. To begin, I'd love to start with something personal. Can each of you share your first memory of using public transit in Surrey and the last time you took transit? How do those experiences compare?
I was just handed the mic. Can you hear me? Thank you, Annie. I had to really think about this because I grew up in the Tri-Cities and so an adjacent municipality to Surrey. And my first experience taking public transportation to Surrey was 15 years ago. There was a great sale on a Christmas holiday at Central City, and I took the Sky. Well, at the time, the 97B line, then the SkyTrain, the Millennium Line, then switch at Columbia, then get to Central City. We took a long time. It took about an hour and a half at the time. And I was 15 years old. I was on holiday break. I didn't really have anything to do. So I was like, yeah, this seems very reasonable. And then you flash forward to 3 years ago when I started working here in the city of Surrey in Newton at Diversity Community Resources Society. And I thought, you know what, let me do transit again. And it was just a non-starter because I now live in Port Coquitlam, and it still would take me about an hour and a half to get to work. And so that's 3 hours in my week, 15 hours 3 hours in a day, 15 hours in a week, and so it's just not worth it for me to transit, unfortunately. But I am in contact with many newcomers and many other residents in the city that do transit. My parents transit as well in many different areas of the metro area. So yeah, I understand the challenges, but unfortunately I haven't had the opportunity to use public transportation in the city meaningfully because the incentives for somebody that lives outside of the city are just simply not there.
Hi everybody. First of all, I love the way how everybody has come here. You must be thinking about your first experience with transit. I remember it so clearly. It was in 2023, my first trip from Newton to Service Canada. I don't remember what I was doing, why I was going to Service Canada. But please don't judge. I had to take a bus back home, and I stood at the same bus stop where I actually dropped off because of the same name. I know. So somebody actually, I had a word with another girl. I was like, what's wrong? I'm going the opposite way. And she's like, okay. She taught me like a 5-year-old, and that was my first experience with community as well. So my first experience inculcates everything, like being a good listener, trusting the other person, not being hesitant to ask a very simple question where you can seem like you know nothing. But yes, this is how community here is. You can ask anything, everything. Being a support worker, I always tell my clients, do not hesitate to ask the question. Here people are so helpful, they'll actually teach you. Maybe they can accompany you to drop somewhere. So it was a very nice experience. And yeah, thank you for making this space a very safe space where we can ask anything and everything. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Take you back to 2009, and I was doing my practicum for my teaching. It's called PDP at LA Matheson, actually. Kind of another story about that. I was carrying a very, very heavy duffel bag, like almost the size of me, because I'd gone back to school and I could not afford a car. And so when it came time for a practicum in Surrey, I was living in Burnaby at the time. It was quite a hefty trip to go from 2 buses to a SkyTrain. There was no R6 or anything like that. So it was a bit of a journey for sure, right? Like around, almost an hour with that duffel bag. So waiting in the rain when there wasn't as many as now as there are, like the covered shelters, yeah, it was a lot. People still tell me, like, how did you do that? Because it's a very stressful time. And I was like, well, I couldn't afford a car, right? So what else am I going to do? These days, I still love to use it. Yes, I have a car, and I do need to use it because I can't carry around all this stuff. But on the weekends, any opportunity there is to take transit, and as a public school educator, I believe that field studies or field trips should be on public transit as often as possible. The school buses have become exorbitantly expensive. You're looking at $1,000 just to go anywhere. But then our kids get a great opportunity. A lot of them, it's their first time, like here in Surrey. And they go, oh, I've never taken transit before. And we ask questions, they get to learn. Sometimes we screw up, it's okay. But we do it together. So for me, it's become a bit of a philosophy to say that if I'm gonna teach students all kinds of things, one of the things is gonna be how to be a really, someone who believes in public transit and makes use of it as often as they can.
I'm going to date myself a bit because my first transit memory was in the 90s. This is actually my neighborhood. So I grew up here. I went to Old Yale Elementary School and I graduated from Kwantlen Park Secondary. I was the first graduating class once it changed from, who knows what it used to be? West Wally. West Wally, thank you. And I have my QE rivalry in here in the back there. So I would say like one of my first memories, and just to give some context, was actually with my grandparents who have lived out here in the same house for 50 plus years. And we took the Expo line from here all the way to Waterfront. And I remember taking the C bus over to the other side. Growing up here, we would jump on different buses and such. And just to give some other context, and I'm absolutely heartbroken, and I think it is one of the most devastating and poor decisions to us not replace it, but I was the aquatic supervisor at the North Surrey Rec Center. And this was a transit hub. This was a very, very meaningful and important facility for children, for this whole community, for seniors, just everybody living in this area. Just to give you some context, the other pool is Guildford. That's the next closest one. And we had children in this neighborhood that were able to walk and have field trips at our pool. We used to be able to provide field trips for them. Now the inaccessibility of having to go to another pool, and including our Surrey residents not having a rec center here, they go to the New West Pool or Delta. So even in that place, it's more accessible for somebody to go over the new Stallawasam Bridge and go to another facility. So we're losing people in this community. So this neighborhood and the transit space, also because I said it's from the 90s, it's not Surrey Center, it's Surrey Place Mall. That's what it originally was, and I still hold my memories to that. But seeing that piece here, and it was mentioned with transportation, I graduated from UBC, and I have one of my graduate alumni here, and she would know that I would get to UBC late every day because I had to drive. And many a days, ironically, driving through the tunnel in which I'm working on right now, but many times I would see people waiting at the bus stop and it was raining and the bus would go past them that I actually would pull over and pick up people in my car at Southwest Marine. But again, it's just highlighting that people are trying, and I even, transportation, when I was, did my undergrad, went to Portland in Richmond, and trying to take that transit, you go downtown Vancouver to go to Richmond and that piece. So I do have a very good memory of, fun times when it was paper tickets and you put the money in and the paper ticket shoots up. Now it's this compass card, and if you lose your compass card, you got to pay for another compass card. But I would love to see more of that accessibility piece here.
Thank you so much for getting personal with us right away. You connect with students, newcomers, refugees, families across Surrey. What is the most pressing thing that you're hearing about public transit right now?
I guess I'll go again. Yeah, so as Evan said, I work with the local immigration partnership here in Surrey, and recently we did a focus group as well as a newcomer needs assessment to understand the barriers that newcomers are facing. We do this every year, and for 2025, the results are going to come out sometime in May, so keep an eye out for that information. But one of the key themes that came in conversation with newcomers, particularly in the focus groups, was just access, right? Access to community, access to healthcare services, access to rec centers, to amenities, grocery stores, and the underlying barrier there was no frequent public transportation for them, right? Communities here in Surrey, the second largest city, biggest growing city in the province, just doesn't have the public transportation infrastructure to support such a growing population. And you can see that clearly when you're talking to, not just newcomers, really any resident in the city, in how difficult it is to get, and you've seen it from the slides, east to west, right? Or west to east. North to south, not so much. But again, the barriers that people are facing are predominantly those at the margins. And when we're talking to newcomers around this, the main source of, discomfort was just the inability to be able to, just engage in the system for themselves, not being able to know where those routes are or how to get there in an effective way or how to support their family or their children access those services either. So the bottom line really of those conversations and the needs assessment really reflected that public transportation, while it wasn't necessarily like the stuff that people were voicing, was really the underlying reason as to why people didn't have access to community, they didn't have access to better healthcare, or not better healthcare, but just access to a healthcare facility or schools. And that is just simply, I think, unacceptable in a city that is as big and as multicultural as this one. So that is just one of the main concerns that we've heard. I'll share a little bit of an anecdote here. One of the participants in that focus group actually works here in Surrey, but lives in Abbotsford. And I told you about this last week when we chatted. But he said, that he's coming from Afghanistan, public transportation there wasn't really great. So he said, the public transportation system here is fantastic compared to where I'm coming from. But it takes me, again, 1.5 hours to get from Abbotsford to Surrey and then back. So 3 hours total in a day. And he needs to navigate BC Transit and then TransLink, because they're two separate systems, because you're like outside of the metro area as soon as you cross that mythical border. And then he was saying, it's like, but I'm really happy, I'm excited, I get to at least, my work is close to a bus stop. So that really highlighted to me the importance of, workplaces next to a bus stop, amazing for this individual. Sucks though that it's 1.5 hours, because again, that's 15 hours in a week. Imagine what this person can do with that time if they're not just on a bus or forever, really. So again, just thinking about those, and then thinking about the city of Surrey as, the city says the future lives here, fastest growing city in the province. We're also becoming a hub with other municipalities around us that are inadvertently coming because people are working. I mean, I work here and I live elsewhere. And so better connections to the city from the adjacent municipalities are also necessary. And Abbotsford, definitely one of those. Because again, rents are cheaper and people are moving further into the Fraser Valley. So just something to think about.
Being a support worker, I have all the clients facing gender-based violence, and we support all the genders out there. Majorly, my clients are financially not strong. So the major concern is they make, for them, transit is a actually a luxury. Basically, it's a necessity, but somebody who doesn't have an alternative for it, eventually the transit becomes a luxury. So this is one of the struggles we face being a non-profit, that whom to hold accountable for this. Secondly, the safety security. Mostly in the safety plan, I had to let my clients know that be in a crowded space or place where you feel that you are not safe enough to come across the abuser, even if there is a no contact order on that person. You have to take care of yourself. In emergency situations, yes, we have police out there. That is important and that is necessity. But what about the unpredictable situations? Whom to hold accountable again? So that is a very basic question my clients ask at times. What did I do wrong to face this? And I never have an answer. And I feel so bad that what to say, how to justify anything, where we should hold people accountable, but whom to hold accountable for. Then comes the unpredictable situations. People who are actually facing challenge with substance use. Some of my clients actually say they are the challenge, whereas we should not title them as a challenge. They are not being provided with proper services. They are not being treated properly. They are not being held as a priority, which is actually making them, we are tagging them as challenge, where they are not the challenge. They are somebody who needs some attention, care, love, support, prioritization, so that we can support them accordingly, so that they are not the problem. Problem is something else. They are just, we are using it as a blanket term where we are just putting the blame on somebody and we are not holding somebody accountable. But again, the question is whom to hold accountable. So it's a very big question. I, being a lawyer, being a support worker, I always advocate for people who look for answers. Being a practical person, being a lawyer, I can hold a lot of authorities accountable, but being a support worker, I can't just raise a finger and say that, okay, you are accountable, you are accountable. And being a general public, being just a woman of Indian origin, as an immigrant, as a student, as a support worker, I say just hold your voice so strong. Somebody asked, being a individual, what we can do. Just be authentic. Do not shy or don't afraid of saying what you believe. Put your point out. Anyhow you'll be judged. You'll be acknowledged. You are a separate person. You can have your own ideology, perspective, point of view. Put it out there. Let it be there in air and see whoever gets connected to that, and you will eventually make a group of people, and then your voice would eventually be louder and louder to be heard. So yes, you're not, one person's voice is not soft. One person's voice could be the first individual who is actually putting their feelings in words. So do not stop your feelings to put in words. Try to find correct words to put your thoughts out there.
Thank you so much for that. And before I get to my answer, I just want to say, because if we have politicians in the room or wannabe politicians, I'm one of those, so don't worry. Or I used to be. So I'm not judging anyone. I get it. Just to say that the scapegoating needs to stop. So in Surrey, one of the words I fear sometimes is the idea of safety and public safety, and just knowing the way that we criminalize people to fit them under that term. So it's just, you said it so beautifully, and to just really put that into some, into your mind, right? Be really, really mindful when you're using that kind of language. I get that it's a vote getter, but it's the wrong kind of vote getter. And it means that we're actually excluding a lot more people, and the policies that you're going to put forward are going to be half-hearted. I want to say, well, half-assed, whatever, and they're not really going to solve the issues that we're trying to solve, right? So anyways, thank you for raising that point. From an education perspective, a couple things. LA Matheson is still considered a lower income school, like an inner city school, and so we notice a couple things. For example, we just went to KPU to see the launch of Jack Nagra's beautiful mural. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing. I wanted to take one of my classes down to see kind of social justice at work in different venues in different ways. I ended up having to pay $50 out of my own money just to take kids down, which is not, it's just an R6, half an hour. And that's a lot of money for a teacher, and the fact that there was no fund to help with that. And so that's one thing, that you have families that cannot afford transit. And so the idea of that lower income affordability is very, very important. It's very key, especially to newcomers, but also others as well. Number two, students are working or want to work more and more, and it's not just the weekends, it's right after school. And so that east-west idea is really important. I heard it for years, because I do get students to be involved in community like amplifications and engagements. They've done amazing work throughout the years, and they always bring that up. If I want to go to work, my parents are working, because again, you're talking about socioeconomics, where it's a more lower class, working class, I should say. And so mom, dad, whomever, they're not going to be able to pick up the kid to take them to school, right? They're on their own. And so parents come home from maybe even a double shift, right? Things like that. And so that idea of true kind of connection. So if I have to get a job and it's in Guildford, right? Or if I have to go south, right? That needs to be really accessible. Thirdly, we used to have funding. I know it was only a year. I remember that conversation very well from the provincial government. It was the first year, I think, was 60 million, and then it was a 20 million after that, but that's gone now. And so we used to be able to have not even low cost. It was just like compass cards or just transit passes that we could give kids to get to places. There's some incredible Indigenous programming around wood carving, art, drums, all kinds of things, but you need to get there. So we used to be able to just sign up kids for programming at different schools, and you just gave them a transit pass, right? And they would get there, they would get home safe, and families felt comfortable then for their kids to sign up. Now we have to scramble. It's no longer, the secretary has them, right? Now it's a scramble. Now it's me applying for grants or maybe getting once in a blue moon little donation and making sure that it goes to the counselors, that it goes to Indigenous, or whoever, right? And BSU, to make sure that they have some money there that they can tap into. I think we shouldn't be thinking in silos. So for me, it's it's my school. It's not just my school. These are students across Surrey that all need this kind of support. So I read the plan, and all of those apply to kids. And when I look at that map, I really see it through students' eyes or an educator's perspective to think of where do our kids need to go, how do they get there, and can they even get there? Last but not least, doubling down on the idea of gender-based analysis, safety in the proper way, that students are working, they might be working late. I want to make sure that they're getting home safe, that it's properly lit, that they're not walking in the middle of the road, and that always is a concern to me, to think that if kids are getting home late, how are they getting home? And I know it's a parental concern. I just remembered one last thing. This affects parents hugely. There's been some changes with ICBC and how parents can drive their kids to games and who they can put in their car. It's a lot. There's a lot of paperwork. And I get it, but for parents, it's become really difficult. The amount of money that we end up spending on taxis, God bless the taxis, but the amount of money, right? Again, it's this huge amplification that we don't need. And if it was really possible to have that 7-minute, 15-minute, reduce those waits, then those teams and all kinds, again, of programming, mentorship programs, they could get to their locations much easier and much cheaper, thereby saving, the education system money and being able to be put into other programming. I know government likes to say, by absolute numbers, we give more, but relatively speaking, we're in austerity budgets right now. So we're losing funding. And so everywhere we can find those savings by a good transit plan would make a massive difference for sure.
I'm only going to say a couple things about the safety comment because it could be a semester. The way that the community I work with, and I'll speak about that, when we view safety, the narrative that's usually put out in politics is not reflective of the realities of the population. So safety is being defined politically to polarize different situations and also push funding towards other things and not towards what are the essential needs. And the community I work with, and I'll speak about that, I think we define safety as a place where people are welcomed and accessible, that they don't have to choose between food and housing or lights, and that kids can get from one place to another. And right now, the narrative of safety is a response to the results of poverty, which have all been systematically instilled through policy or lack thereof policy. That's all I'm gonna say on that. So I'm gonna come from the perspective of representing the Surrey BAC Advisory, or the Surrey Black African Caribbean Advisory, which is a advisory food security table originally that came out as Surrey Seeds of Change. And so the advisory had originally started as the Surrey Seeds of Change food security table. We're trying to identify some of the inequities that were experienced in Surrey around food. And one of the populations in Surrey that was showing disproportionate inequities around housing, food insecurity, safety, all of those pieces ended up being Surrey's Black population. Surrey has the province's largest Black population, and at the time, the current Surrey municipality was not aware of that. Surrey is also out in the Metro Vancouver area as of data, and I may have to get you to confirm it. I believe that out of Metro Vancouver, Surrey will take in 1/5 of all newcomers. And I think it's 42 or 45% of the province's newcomers actually come to Surrey. So that's also representing a challenge in terms of inequities around income. And so the group, even though they focused on food, all of the BAC members are either Black-led, Black-serving organizations or Black representatives from other organizations. And a big piece around this table had come together is that we can't talk about food without talking about housing. We can't talk about food without talking about transportation. So one of the pieces, and I think it was said earlier, where transportation, and it's been said by the community, and also this data is out there, that transportation takes a huge portion of a household's income, whereas that money could be going towards food. So when we're looking at income-based solutions to address food insecurity, an income-based solution would be to offset the cost of transportation. And given that Surrey has the province's highest childhood poverty, highest childhood food insecurity, one of the quickest aging senior populations, and the largest newcomer population, the largest youth population in the whole province, the highest inequities in terms of income and poverty, and we don't have these offsets towards these essential pieces that could help us with that other piece. We're seeing Surrey develop beautifully, but that's also a huge get out of here, and you can't afford to live in these spaces. In my former employment, working in health, during the pandemic, I got pulled into, this is an example, I got pulled into contact tracing. And you would call and like, why are 10 people living in a 1-bedroom, each trying to pay and each trying to work? And that was very common throughout this community. So one of the pieces in where this group, when we're addressing these other inequities, I think it's important for us, while we're here talking about transportation, that transportation is not a standalone. One of the surveys that we did with the BAC advisory was, we're talking about culturally preferable food, where do you get it? If you're here, you know it's between 104 and 108 on King George. And we did a survey around food costing, because if you've seen the province's food costings survey, the amount of money that people are trying to spend on groceries for their families is taking a huge portion of their household income. And so we did one for the Black community, and we were finding out that people were just trying to get their cultural preferred food, were again an hour and a half, 2 hours. They're coming from Abbotsford, they're coming from all over just to come to this hub area. And then we're finding out that even if they are living within these areas, if they don't have access to a car, the buses don't come. Who's like missed the bus and had to wait another 45 minutes to an hour? There we go, an hour for that bus. Or the bus said it was going to come and it didn't come. And so that's putting people out. A lot of our urban, more urban neighborhoods don't even have buses running in them. And so this is putting people off from then having to send Uber or having to figure out, what do I do with this funding piece here? So one of the big pieces that the BAC advisory, and I know I'm talking about, say, the Black African Caribbean population, along with the BAC community and Indigenous communities, those are the populations that this data is out there. There's nothing to refute that the inequities of experiencing disproportionate outcomes are there. And we are advocating and trying to use that these most equities deserving and seeking groups, if they're informing and addressing these other low pieces, the benefits will actually benefit all populations. So if we're addressing like, hey, this is a safety concern or an accessibility concern, if you address it, the benefits go up. I don't believe in trickle-down economics, but I believe in equity economics going up. So,
well, thank you so much. And that's kind of the reason why we wanted to bring all of you here on this panel. Like, we hear from transit experts all the time about what Surrey needs, so we're hearing from you. I'm just overwhelmed. We have a lot of work to do as a transit advocacy group, and so moving on to the next, actually I wanted to mention that some of the challenges that you addressed were captured in our Surrey Transit Future, so Nav is standing there, maybe you can. We'll share a bit about like what is in that transit future, and I do want to give a shout out to Asan, Abby, and Gavin here who led that work. So you want to stand, please? Asan is over there; he's very shy. Gavin is in pink over there, and Abby's not here. But this next section of our panel is unique. Actually, huge credits to Dennis for coming up with this. So we went out and talked to transit riders at bus stops and exchanges and asked them what their challenges were, and you'll hear from them directly. But before we get to that, let's see the Surrey Transit Future.
Surrey has a broken transit network. Despite having the biggest surge of transit riders since COVID in all of North America, Surrey is stuck with a bus network that remains mostly unchanged for decades now, and it's time to fix that. The City of Surrey commissioned a plan for a restructured bus network called the Surrey Transit Vision, all while TransLink worked to get started on their south of Fraser East area transport plan. But we at Movement have the benefit of being a little more ambitious. So we hit the streets, spent hours collecting data and testimonials from everyday transit riders across Surrey, all to create this. This is Surrey's transit future. Movement's vision for an all-encompassing bus network that does more than just funnel people to the SkyTrain. We had three key ideas: new bus routes, expand bus infrastructure, and improve pedestrian infrastructure. It would work like this. Much of Surrey's bus network today is indirect and focused on north to south travel, so it's very difficult to travel east to west across all of Surrey. Excluding the 364 and 388 along 64th and 88th Avenues, every other trip across the city requires a transfer at a major bus exchange like Surrey Central or Newton. Our revamped bus network sees a multitude of new east-west routes and north-south routes, allowing for local trips all over Surrey to be much simpler. We've also included new express bus and regional routes to make those long-distance and regional connections that much more convenient, like a highway bus connecting Surrey to Coquitlam. But improved bus services doesn't mean much without the infrastructure to support it. After all, buses need to take breaks and turn around somewhere, and the existing exchanges are in dire need of relief. So we proposed some new bus exchanges and some improvements to the existing ones, opening up the possibilities for where routes can begin and terminate. Better bus exchanges also go a long way for making the rider experience more comfortable when transfers are needed. I don't know about you, but I'd much rather transfer at a dedicated exchange than have to cross some busy street in Panorama Ridge. Oh, and we're also calling for bus priority along Surrey's road network. Finally, every transit trip starts and ends with the sidewalk, so we want to see the walking, rolling, and waiting experience be improved. There are far too many places in Surrey with subpar sidewalks, non-existent crosswalks, bus stops without benches or cover, or overall poor lighting. And to wrap it all together, here's a bit about our process for creating this plan.
To ensure our plan was grounded in the experience of transit riders, we met with riders at bus stops, gathered ideas from our movement volunteers, and met with TransLink, the City of Surrey, and their consultants to make sure we were all on the same page.
So that's Surrey's transit future. There's so much more to this plan. So if you want to see all the good stuff that I didn't mention here while admiring these maps in all their glory, then you should read the full plan on our website at movementybr.ca/stf.
Woo. QR code and get access to that report. And Arden English is here with us. Arden. So a lot of what you shared, the east-west connections, low-income fare pass, that's all included in that plan, and also the emphasis on pedestrian experience and improving that. but that element about safety is not something that we explicitly talked about in the plan, but, you know, hopefully. This is something that we wanted to present to the city, like, as, like, mimicking their plan, like what they usually put out. So that was our best effort, and we'll do a lot to mobilize around it. Moving on to the next, is there anything that you want to say?
Surrey has a broken transit network.
Anything that you want to add?
Can I just say something that I look for in representatives is the ability to take like this grassroots expertise, like plans like this, and then apply those lenses, right? Be it a safety one, right? Be it an education one, be it an economic one, whatever lens it is, right? You know, a racialized, you know, combating ableism, right? All these things. So that's what I hope for. It's not that you have to have all the answers, but I want you to add more. So if people are doing all the work, which all of you are doing so beautifully, I want a representative that can take it and run with it and take it beyond. So you don't have to do every single thing and be told, oh, you missed this, you missed that. Well, of course, right? How about you do some work now, right? Because if we're voting for you and you're showing, oh, I'm an expert in this, or, you know, I can help in this regard, then you need to take the voices of the people and actually apply that lens, because no one has all the lenses, right? We're all intersectional, but we all live very, like, we're all only experts on our own lives, right, at the end of the day. So that's just something that I'm hopeful for this plan.
100%.
I want to hear from the politicians how they're going to use this plan. Not necessarily just, that's a great plan. Okay, thanks, right? Like what exactly is going to happen with it? For sure. Sorry, yes, of course.
I would add to this because that plan is fantastic. If you haven't read it, you should. I mean, twice already I've read it, and it is really, really good because it talks about all the things that we are talking about right now, and all the things that I hear directly from the organizations that are part of the local immigration partnership and the newcomers that access services from those organizations. But one thing that I found surprising and at the same time disappointing is that the city did not engage the public in the development of their own transit plan, right? Movement, and kudos to you, did this out of the need for, you know, public input in our transportation planning. The city, however, should have done that already, and they do, right? And not to like, you know, badmouth the city here. They do engage with us in many different ways. In fact, the Surrey Local Immigration Partnership has been a partner of the city and the planners at the city last year for two particular projects, the amendment of their official community plan, as well as the feasibility study on the development of the Newton Exchange and the adjacent lands around it. And we engaged newcomer populations in multiple different languages, youth, seniors, to engage with the city and provide context and input to the planners. So it is just incredibly disappointing that the city didn't reach out when there are structures and community organizations like the Surrey Local Immigration Partnership, like some of these other folks over here, who have an ear to the ground and are able to funnel those particular voices in community input that is going to affect the rest of the community. There's really no excuse for public elected officials or soon to be public elected officials, I'm looking at you right there, to not engage with us fully and with these populations, right? I mean, you can't just run for election and then not engage with us after you've been elected in office. So that's just a key point of one, disappointment, but also of urgency, right? Consultation is important, and we are here to work with you. We're not here to work against you.
Just a quick point, again, going back on all the information that we have, I would put it as definitely to current municipal staff across all communities, people who are running, to, yes, one, listen and take this information, the data's out there, but also to be creative and innovative. We can't keep doing and responding and implementing the same things that we've done year after year after year. It's not working. So here we have these different visions and ideas, and I just would encourage bravery and creativity. There's many, not even global, but like national examples of transportation and plans, and then there's research coming out, and if Surrey wants to be ahead and be one of the, I think it's in one of the values of the city, we need to apply this into it. So instead of just having the staple value, like, I want to see it.
Thank you so much. Now we can move on to the next videos.
Surrey.
ਸਾਨੂੰ ਬੱਸਾਂ ਸਰਵਿਸ ਵਧੀਆ ਲੱਗਦੀ ਹੈ ਬਾਕੀ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਆਮ ਨਾਰਮਲ ਬੰਦਾ ਵੀ ਇਹਦੇ ਤੇ ਰਾਈਡ ਕਰ ਲੈ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਆਮ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਕਿ ਬੱਚੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਗੱਡੀ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਲੈ ਸਕਦੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਗੱਡੀ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹਦੇ
So
so just to translate that, we do have subtitles there, but yeah, we went to, Arden and I, we went to Newton Exchange one day and we talked to transit riders there, and she was just like running to her bus right now, so really appreciate her stopping and chatting with us. But what she's sharing is that, you know, transit offers this freedom, like not having to own a car, you know, like that car that you can't afford, so she's just talking about that affordability piece. And we'll move on to the next one, another person that we talked at Newton Exchange.
Surrey has a broken transit network.
The only affordable way for me to get around is by bus. I think it'll just make it a little less accessible for certain people who like need every single dollar just to live their daily life. Just keep in mind who needs help the most. When I was a kid, I used the buses on the weekend, but since starting university, the only affordable way for me to get around is by bus. It's a pretty long commute. I think it's maybe an hour and a half to get to the closest campus and about 2 hours each way to get to the Richmond campus. And then also for my job near Wally, it's again about an hour and a half either way. So just in terms of getting from White Rock to places, it's usually a bit longer.
Yeah, your reactions on that. And Dennis mentioned this, that we are one of the only regions in Canada that doesn't have a low-income fare pass. So yeah, and it's one of the most expensive regions to live in as well. So yeah, can you speak from your perspective why this low-income fare pass is needed and how we can make it happen here?
First of all, thank you. I love this, right? Because as an educator, like you want to make it interactive. You want to have voices come in. Like, you know, we can fill this room, but there's so many more people that have voices. It's a brilliant way to do a panel where like other voices can take part without necessarily being here, right? You know, I love what you said about looking at, you know, food insecurity and what's actually tied to that, and that forced poverty, right? And all of that. So to me, when I think low income, like why? Right? That's the red flag of a symptom of a deeper problem. And so for me, as someone who actually has a disability, a visual one, and I don't know if I'll be driving, you know, 10, 15 years from now, I don't know. Medically, I don't know. Right now I can, but maybe not in the future. And I always think about people that are living with disabilities. You know, as a teacher, we have a beautiful special needs program at our school. And to think about seniors as well, all kinds of folks, right, that have literally incomes that cannot expand, right? You are living on, you know, such a small amount of money. And then the reality that, of course, you're a contributing citizen. Of course, you can be productive, right? It's not the idea that, oh, they can't be. Of course they can be. But how do we facilitate that? How do we make that easier? So again, the wait times, everything that was said before, like, these are all solutions to doing that. So when I think low income, from the students to the folks who have disabilities, we're really, like, transit should be the best choice every single time, right? No matter what. But especially when we're talking about people who are equity deserving, who are equity seeking, you know, that's one thing we can do. And yeah, and I think it's funny, I was so excited when they were saying like SFU is getting a medical school and UBC is finally going to be in Surrey, but like 10 years from now. And I was thinking about, you know, just the amount of students that tell me, oh my God, it's such a slog. Maybe I'll start at Kwantlen instead of UBC, because transit is that big. And then yes, you're not necessarily going to work in Vancouver. You're going to have to come all the way back just to work in Surrey. So again, financial decisions have to be made, career decisions that, you know, education, training decisions that need to be made are being very heavily impacted, sometimes in negative ways. So I really think that we need to look for people that we don't see because they're being locked in, forcibly so, by a system that's not built for it, right? So it's not about adapting the system to work for people specifically, it's building systems around people that already include them to begin with. So when I think of low income, that's what I think about.
I would say when I was a student, I had to take 2 buses, one SkyTrain station, again a bus to reach my college. So at that time I learned time is money. When you live alone by yourself as a newcomer, dealing with a lot of new things, learning system, culture, food, your sleep cycle, new education, how maybe a language, how people pursue it, maybe judgment, a lot of things, a lot of emotional roller coaster you are undergoing too. So I moved nearby SkyTrain station. I literally live 5 minutes from here. So ever since I acknowledged that, I am such an advocate for that please reside nearby a SkyTrain station because you can save a lot of time and eventually money, because if you are living somewhere far away, you're taking the transit, you are investing the same money in the transit, so instead of that wasting time and spending eventually the same money, use your time in a better way, stay nearby transit, and then use your time in a better way. Yes. So I believe that there needs to be some development at farther away places as well. Like she mentioned that education matters a lot. Coming generations are the future. If we are not investing in their mindset, their perspectives, how they are processing, their dreams are very expensive. Instead of thinking about, yes, food, yes, transit, yes, lifestyles, but how we are feeding the dreams is very important. So each point actually plays a very big role when we think about transit. Security, yes, but respecting somebody's time is very important. So, yes.
I wrote some things for this question because I had some math to do. But I will say, I also was a student a few years ago, and I also had to take public transportation up to Burnaby Mountain, and it was atrocious.
You have a story?
Yes, honestly, right? And it was from Harbour Centre and then to Burnaby Mountain. I think there is a rapid bus now. There wasn't before. But then from where I used to live in Port Moody to Burnaby Mountain, it was a bus, then a SkyTrain, eventually the Evergreen line. But then many a times the 143, which I don't think it runs anymore, would just, that's it, okay, it would just pass me by on Inverquidlam, and I'd just be like, well, I guess I'll be late for lecture, just another day. It is what it is. But talking about students, we're talking about students in public universities, but also newcomers are students too. And I wear many hats. One of the other hats that I wear is as a soon-to-be English instructor. And in my practicum recently, I was having a conversation with the class, and all of them are newcomers. They're all, in many different levels of English, and they all use public transportation to get to the campus in Newton where they study. And many of them use single pass fare tickets, which, if you don't know, is about $3.55. Wait, let me check, because I wrote it down.
$3.15.
Part of my notes.
$3.15.
Someone said 315. Yeah. 350. There you go. Thank you. See, I know. So they were saying, yeah, 350 to get to the Newton campus, and then 350 to get back to their house. So that's $7. And then these are, families really that are coming to study. So there's usually, I think the latest stats in 2021 showed that Surrey families are above average in terms of household size in terms of the province. It used to be, I think the average was 4 people in a household. I would venture to say that it's more like 5 to 6 nowadays. We'll yet to see when, the new census comes out. But if you're looking at $7 a day, and these people are taking classes 5 days a week, right? That is $35 in a week. So then multiply that by 4, multiply that by 12. It's almost a little bit over $700 that people are spending just on getting to school. And this is just one transit ride. People are using transit way more than just once a day. So then people are left in these circumstances when if you have a family of 5 and all of you need to use transit and you're all having to pay $35 a week to get places on the lower end, then you are investing a significant amount of your income into that. Combined with the fact that newcomer families, particularly, are low income and they are engaging in survival jobs, or they are earning minimum wage, then you're thinking about a $17.85, I think, is going to be the new minimum wage in June 2026. That's not a lot of money, but it's a lot of money relative to that to go into public transportation. So again, a low-income fare pass makes a lot of sense for students, for newcomers, for students in general, right? People in general that need to access essential services, need to access school, but cannot afford that. And so in the conversation I was having with the students, and this is something that you actually had also shared when we discussed this last week, was that people then are relying to ways around how to use this. And one of the ways is to share compass cards, which, as you know, highly illegal with the Transportation Authority, and then also highly problematic when you get caught, because you get fines, and if you're a newcomer family, then you get a fine, and you don't pay that fine. I recently learned this from Mammon, then that becomes an issue for your credit score. And if it is an issue for your credit score, or you can't get a driver's license, and if you have those type of issues, then it ends up becoming really a compounding inequality and injustice for people that are already at the margins. So a low-income pass would really reduce a lot of those barriers. It will facilitate better access for people, and also just provide more of an equal footing for people in the city and really beyond the metro area.
I'll be quick. Just something that you had said, there's a kind of like a quote or a statement around the punitive passes that were punishing poverty that somebody can't afford, and that's not actually going to address the whole system piece. I kind of just like looking back at this and just looking across the room here and knowing some of the folks, well, conveniently, and it's great, we're able to host and hold this place as a huge transit hub. We have the SkyTrain. But I also know that there's a lot of people who would love to be here too, who are transit users. And maybe some of you are also looking on your phone when your bus or your train is before you have to leave. So one of those pieces where in Surrey, why this is, Surrey is the fastest growing municipality in the province. And not only would more accessible, either income-based and also just reliable transit would benefit our senior population, people who have lower incomes, newcomers, students, youth, but also just having that as an option so that maybe I don't want to take my car today because I'm just going to jump on a quick, rapid bus or something from here to here. So I think that's when looking at all these creative options, yes, we're talking from the high needs of populations, but there's also these other benefits. The biggest piece I would continuously push is the decrease in fare and those other options, and those increase in opportunities and movement actually is an economic benefit, especially to Surrey, because people are able to get to work faster or have more options. And as we're bringing businesses and communities here, it's actually systematically a strategic economic opportunity. The more that people also have in their pocket, the more that they spend in their neighborhoods. So like I said, just the big piece, it breaks my heart when we are working with families and it's literally choosing, do I get the bus pass or do I get food or do I do this? And at the end of it, especially children are, my mom can't register me for this soccer program or this after school program. The rec center is not close by, I can't get to it. And again, that's a policy decision that we've made in our communities, that we're creating conditions which feed into these other social conditions. Again, just going to go into this economic hub, and it just breaks my heart every day about the rec center. I'm not going to let it go. I'm never going to let it go. And I just remember these kids would come here into the pools, and then once the rec center closed, I just saw them lingering around doing nothing and just being idle, and we don't have anywhere for people to go. And finding out even the bus was so quick for people to come get here and be in community. So transportation is actually a part of community. That's where people would come. Did you come to the pool before all the time?
Do not let it go. I tried to get into Aquafit. I walk with a cane. I am on disability. And to do Aquafit at Guildford is a wait list. And then when I have to take the bus and the bus is late, they give up my spot, which then causes me to lose money off of my rec pass.
Because you have to pay and book the classes ahead of time. And just thinking about for anyone that's trying to get out.
I went to Grosvenor Road as a child, so that was an inner city school. We got breakfast program, lunch program. I know all about going to West Wally. So it was very heartbreaking when they decided to put the rinks down below and not even think about adding a pool. And then when the government decided to change our bus pass to the $52 a month for somebody with a disability, you can opt out of it and you can have your $52 to buy your food, or you keep your $52 so that you can actually travel, which we live like 4 blocks down. I could have actually walked to this rec center and been able to do my physical therapy in the pool, and now I can't.
Thank you for sharing that. That's the exact issue, having to choose between this or that, and I think this transportation in the fastest growing city will bring better livelihood for all of us.
15 seconds if you don't mind. Sorry. Am I going to forget what I want to say? Maybe. Just number one, I was the first generation UPass generation, and I remember the contentiousness of it all. That's probably a new word now, contentiousness, but and the reality of just how many people fought against that, like you know, kids who could drive compared to the rest of us. And then when that passed, how overnight it became a huge success. Overnight, things became accessible. As cars broke down with all the students and they realized, oh, I can just hop on a bus, right? Like that was an introduction of a kind of like a low income